Last week on Something's About to Happen.
And yes, learning does happen in crowds like this, and I don't want to make light of that. However, you are at best a good church member when the only learning you get is when you come to church. But you are a real believer when after the crowd has departed, you don't go to the bishop or the pastor, you go to God to ask him questions from his word, from the text, from a conversational experience in the koinonia fellowship between you and him. Because my friends, learning starts when you are away from the crowd. And Jesus says something important to us, that you have a new perspective when you've been through failure, asked the question and gotten the answer. You have a new perspective on a certain problem. And so he begins to teach using a metaphor and says to them that if you have faith as little as a mustard seed, that your mountain is going to move. In other words, he's saying that this is how potent your faith is. This is how potent faith is. The faith, you don't need volumes of it, you don't need gallons of it, you don't need truckloads of it, you don't even need to be able to see your faith. You can fix that problem with just a little bit of faith. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you have enough faith. We used to play with hydrochloric acid in chemistry lab at school, and they would write HCl conc. And what conc means is concentrated. God can concentrate into something you cannot see with the natural eye enough power into something that's the size of a pinprick. That's how conc real faith is. It's not the amount of faith, it's the authenticity of the faith. And as long as you have the authenticity of the faith, my friends, you don't need much of it at all. A little bit of faith will move mountains. Oh God, I feel like somebody's mountain is getting ready to get up and move completely out of somebody's way. Who am I talking to this Sunday morning? In other words, what Jesus is saying to them is that you can speak to this mountain and say to the mountain, move, and the mountain will hear you and completely obey you. He has just come down from the mountain so they can all see a mighty mountain standing up there behind him. It looks so large, it looks so daunting that they feel like we can't see beyond this mountain. Because when you're standing up in front of a mountain, put a mountain up for me. When you're standing up in front of a mountain, the mountain blocks your view of everything beyond the mountain. Look at the scale of the man and the mountain. He is so tiny in front of the mountain, yet the mountain is miles and miles behind him. And because of where he's standing, he cannot see anything beyond the mountain. In fact, if he's looking at the mountain is the only thing he can really see. Because when mountains are in your way, they obscure your ability to see your possibility, to see your tomorrow, to see what's beyond the mountain. There could be a rainbow that terminates in a treasure chest on the other side of the mountain, but you won't even see the rainbow nor the treasure because the mountain is in the way. Can I tell somebody this Sunday morning that there's a powerful life in front of you, but there's a big mountain between you and that future. There's a powerful destiny in front of you, but there's a tall standing mountain that's standing in your way. There's a powerful economic future for somebody under the sound of my voice, but the mountain is in your way. And Jesus tells us that even if your faith is minuscule and you still hold on to that faith, you will say to the mountain, move, and the mountain has to move. Is there anybody here who doesn't have a mountain? If you don't have a mountain, sit down. But if you do have something that's standing in the way of your possibility, standing in the way of your promise, standing in the way of your prophecy, I want you on the count of 3 to say, mountain, move. 1, 2, 3. Sit down for a moment. I want to talk to you about the mountain that is standing in front of you in your life right now. When Jesus came down from the mountain, they could see the daunting size of the mountain. So it was the appropriate metaphor for him to use because he could see the scale of the mountain. And he knows how big it was because he had to climb all the way to the top of the mountain with his 3 innermost apostles. And he says to them, as big as the mountain is, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, it's enough to shift the mountain that's in front of you right now. When a mountain is in front of you, you cannot see beyond it. It blocks your vision. The promise of the power of your faith is always disproportionate to the size of your mountain. You don't have to have faith the size of the mountain in order to move the mountain. So I don't have to be a heavyweight boxer to beat the heavyweight boxer. I don't have to be mountain size in my faith in order to shift a mountain. Glory to God. God wants you to hear this because of the mountain that is in front of you today, right now. Now, I don't know what your mountain is, but I know that you probably have a mountain. And whatever's standing in your life and blocking your vision so that you can't see your way through, you can't see your way out, you can't see your way up to the dream's dawn or the dawning dream of your life, I want to tell you that thing is going to move. Somebody shout, move. If you're not sharp to it yet, I want you to understand that the mountain is dead. The mountain is what it is. When you see it, that's what it is. But my friend, the seed of your faith, it is not what it is. It has a potential in it that can grow. Ooh. And it sure enough is going to grow. And when it starts growing, it's going to move against your mountain. So that it's not by might, nor by your power, but by God's Spirit, saith the Lord, that Zerubbabel, this mountain standing in front of you, it will become like a plain. Somebody shout, move. See, when you have that mountain, but you also have faith like a mustard seed, you add glory to that faith. And why is glory important? Because as little as your faith is, once you start worshiping God and the glory of God distills upon your faith, glory is the word weighty. So little faith plus God's glory means weightiness. And all that your little faith needs to be heavier and stronger than your mountain is God. As long as God is with you, and that's what faith is about, bringing God into play in the circumstance, that mountain has to move. In other words, God says that he's like a parent who has just birthed a little child, and the little child can't talk. It cannot be articulate. It cannot be eloquent. But even though it cannot speak, it can let out a little cry. And mama and papa will run straight to the crib. And once they are there and the baby senses their presence, she is calmed. God says how parents are with their newborn babies, that's how I am with you. That all I need for you to know is that once you call me, and you have faith that my ears are not deaf that I hear, and that my hands are not short, I will save. I will step into your situation, and there's no mountain in your life that I cannot move. But I need you to get the right perspective on who you are. One of the things a mountain does is it blocks your vision. So you stop dreaming, you stop hoping, you stop aspiring, you stop wanting, because all you see is the mountain. Everybody in the valley at the Mount of Transfiguration, the only thing they could see was the mountain. Because it was so big. It was bigger than them. It was bigger than their faith. So they didn't believe anything could happen because they couldn't see. Your mountain is going to clear out of your way. and you will see your new life in front of you and will be able to walk into that future, because your mountain that was blocking your vision will step all the way out of the way. Faith is impaired by wrongful self-perception. When you don't see yourself correctly, it injures your faith. It impairs the little faith that you have. Jesus makes it clear that it wasn't because you lacked faith that you didn't win, but your faith was impaired. How is our faith impaired? A small self-concept of yourself injures your faith. So when we see ourselves as small, it's because of how we see or perceive ourselves. And so we feel we can't have that. We can't do this. We can't own that. We can't attain this. We can't receive that because of a small self-concept. So you ultimately have to challenge your perception of yourself. I'm in this room now. I can see everything. I can see that Jeep camera. I can see the glass block windows. I can see the light behind the glass block. I can see the ushers. But you know, it's part of all the things that I can see. My eyes are positioned in my head in such a way that they are positioned for me not to see me. So the only way I can know me is by my imagination. And that means I have to rely on something else or somebody else to sketch me, or to draw me, or to picture me. And then I'm seeing an image of me, but I'm not seeing me. And that means if you're trusting the wrong person to tell you what you look like, or trusting a person who doesn't really know you and looks at you with the eyes but doesn't look at you with insight, they will misdefine you, and that becomes how you imagine yourself. And you imagine yourself like a nobody. So when somebody steps up in your world, you feel too small to associate, too small to collaborate, too small to dialogue, too lesser to be part of whatever's in their world. Because you've undermined your own self-consciousness. Who are you? That's why you got to be with people who feed the correct self-image. So that when you look in the mirror, you don't define yourself by what the mirror tells you. In fact, there's only one mirror by which you can define yourself. 1 John chapter 4, verse 17. As he is, so are we in this world. 2 Corinthians 3, verse 17 and 18. Now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And we all with open face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are transformed into his likeness, into the same image, in progressive glory. You hear what I'm saying? So if you want to know what you are like, look at Jesus. If you want to know what you are like, look at God. Because when God wanted a mirror to see himself, he made man. And he said, let us make man in our image and in our likeness, and let him be just like us in dominion and in power. You hear what I'm saying? That's why you're so creative. That's why you're so inventive. That's why you're so innovative. You've got to study your failure as a person. You've got to study your failure as a family. And when you ask the right questions of your failure, it will give you the right answers. But don't let me disappoint you. The answer is always going to be as small as a mustard seed. It will always be disproportionate to the mountain that you want to move. But once you get it, you've got it. Now their faith, they had it. But the challenge with them is that because of their poor self-concept, they couldn't believe their faith.
The largest, #1, trending, inspirational gospel music concert on the African continent The Experience 2019. Let's worship Jesus. Date is Friday, 6 December 2019 at the Tafawa Baliwa Square, Onikan, Lagos, from 7 p.m. till the break of dawn. Enjoy soul-stirring worship from your favorite gospel artists: Travis Green, Sinach, Todd Delaney, Mercy Chinwo, Nathaniel Bassey, Planet Shakers, Ono Sario, Choma Jesus, Donnie McClurkin, Eben, Samuel Poso, Tope Alabi, Brie Odede, Don Moen, William McDowell, and Metropolitan Gospel Choir host Pastor Paul Adefarasin. It's going to be a night of worship at the Experience 2019. Friday, 6 December, 7 p.m. till dawn. TBS Onicon Lagos. Come, let's worship Jesus like you've never experienced it before. More details at theexperiencalagos.com. Brace yourself.
Go with me to Numbers 13. And let's look at verse 32 and verse 33. And they brought up an evil report. These are the 12 spies, 10 of them in particular, about the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search is a land that it eats up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people we saw in it are men of, oh, they're so great, they're so big, they're so big. All the men, all the men. Verse 33. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight. God did not identify with Anak. The whole world was afraid of the Israelites because of what they did to the Egyptians by their God. Now they're in front of Anak and they are afraid because of poor self-concept. We see ourselves in our own sight as grasshoppers, and we are also like grasshoppers in their own sight. People treat you how you treat yourself. People see you by the legitimacy that you show them how you see yourself. If your self-concept is weak, poor, decrepit, that's how everybody's going to see you. How you treat you is how you encourage others to treat you. Treat yourself better. Look at 3 people right now, tell them you're much better than that. Much better. Much better. See, if your self-concept is that of a child, when you are destined to be a king, you'll keep treating yourself like a child. But if as a child your parents teach you that you are born a king, you are royalty. David was thinking like a king when he was a child. Moses was thinking like a warrior when he was but a domestic helper in the house of Pharaoh. Joshua was thinking like the leader when he was Moses' personal assistant. How are you thinking? If your circumstances have so surmounted you that you're not thinking about your tomorrow because all you see is your circumstance and its complications, you need to move your mountain. I'm thinking of another woman. She was the widow of Zaraphat. The prophet Elijah has created a famine in the land. And he's now a victim of his prophecy. And he's lacking for water. So God sends him to leave where he is and go to the brook Cherith. Then the brook Cherith runs dry. God says, now go to Zaraphat. I have commanded a widow woman there to support you. And he gets to Cherith and he sees this woman gathering sticks. And he said, give me something to eat. The woman looked at him and said, I only have a little bit of flour in a jar and a little bit of oil, a corner of oil in the jar. I'm about to cook it together and eat it with my only son and die. Elijah said, serve the voice of God first. And she obeyed him. And the Bible tells us that her cruse of oil and her jar of flour until the end of the famine did not run dry. There's another woman, also a widow, the wife of a prophet. The prophet had died without leaving any life insurance, no legacy for his kids. In fact, he left a deficit so that his creditors were now planning to take the widow's 2 sons and make slaves of them. in order to receive the debt that he was owed. And she runs to Elisha and says, this is what your son did to me, your spiritual son. How are we going to survive? He asked her a question. He said, what do you have in your house? She said, nothing. Let me say this to you. Tell the devil that after all he stole from you, he left a little bit, that he should have taken it all. Because God doesn't need a whole lot in order to bless you. All he needs is a little bit. And he said, check your house well. She said, oh, I have a little corner of oil in my jar, in my vessel. He said, go abroad and borrow many vessels. Borrow not a few. And when you have borrowed them, go in with your sons, shut the door behind you, and pour out that little corner of oil into the clay vessels. She opened the door, closed it behind herself and her sons, and they put the jars one by one. They had a conveyor belt system. She started pouring the oil. She noticed it didn't run out, because there was no limitation on the little oil. It really wasn't on the oil. It was on the faith the prophet had just given her. There was no limit on her faith. But where she had limits was the number of vessels that she had. And one by one, she filled every vessel until she got to the last vessel and poured out the oil, and it filled that vessel. As long as she had vessels, the oil flowed. The moment she ran out of vessels, the oil ceased. I don't know who I'm preaching to this morning. You don't need much faith. All you need is little faith, because faith is like the bread that Jesus took in his hands. And once he blessed it, it multiplied. And it will continue to function in limitlessness. It's like the oil in Zaraphat's jar and the fire in Zaraphat's jar. It's like the oil in the widow woman of the prophet. It was limitless because of their faith. I don't know who this is for, but you better get ready, because you are about to hit the most disproportionate blessing you have ever seen in your life. You're about to walk into a blessing that makes no sense. If you don't believe it, say nothing. But if you do, shout, mountain, move. I don't know who you are, but I see big things moving out of the way in somebody's favor. Who is that person? For the next 3 minutes, I need some real believers who can see mountains, mighty mountains, moving out of their way into a place far beyond. I want those believers who can see mighty mountains that are standing in your way, and you see them moving. I want you to give God 30 seconds of your highest praise. I want to show you another mountain. I want to show you another mountain. The little boy David is sequestered in the backwoods of his father's estate looking after sheep. A prophet whose word never fell to the ground, by name Samuel, comes to the father's house, says, there's a king in your house. There's a king somewhere here. And he walks past 7 boys, thinks that every one of them is the next king, but realizes that God refused for the oil to flow. Said there must be, because God did not lie to me. And they eventually remembered, and they sent for David. Ruddy little handsome boy, walks in with a swagger at 16 years old. And the prophet said, that's the king. He poured the oil flowed. David went back to the backwoods to look after sheep. But now he had a new self-image. The voice that does not fail had just told him, you are the next king. Shoo. Can you imagine what that did for his imagination about himself? Every time he's shoveling sheep, he says, this is not going to last long. Every time he's cleaning up behind the sheep, this is not going to last long. When a lion comes out of the thicket, he kills it, he says, yeah, that's the king. When the bear comes, he does the same thing. That's the king. And one day, he gets to the battlefront and he sees a mountain that's moving. This one has legs and hands. But that was not the real mountain. The real mountain was the generals of Israel cowering in their trenches, afraid of Goliath. That was the mountain. Not Goliath. Goliath was easier to defeat than the lion and the bear. It was the men I respect, the generals of Sandhurst, impotent to this uncircumcised, without covenant Philistine. That would have deterred anybody. And then they pulled rank on him and said, who do you think you are, you ruddy little boy? Where are those little sheep that you've been looking after? David said, is there not a cause? Why? He had a new self-image. That I am a deliverer. I am the king. And kings in that time, it was their responsibility to protect their people, to defend their people, to provide succor for their people, to give their people deliverance. He said, I can deal with this. He went to the king. The king wasn't taking on the giant. Saul was not interested in fighting the giant. He said, you can have my armor, but I'm not going. David tested the armor. It didn't work with his self-image. You remember this David? God got so upset with him because when it was time for battle, David started counting his army. Whereas God has spent all of David's life teaching David, you don't count on anything but me. Because I can deliver by few or by many. I can use a lot or I can use a little, but my preference is always to use less. That way I get my glory by using somebody like you with just a little bit of faith. David took down that giant, and from nowhere, Jesse's boy got a disproportionate blessing. He became the most celebrated man, the most recognized man, the most known man in all of Israel overnight. Just like that. I wonder who has that kind of mountain-moving faith. Mountain-moving faith. Now the boy who had never really seen the throne, he was standing in front of the throne every day, and he knew it was his throne. It won't be more than that. I see big things moving in somebody's favor. Onlookers looking at you right now think that you are crazy, shouting, jumping, dancing, clapping. You are not crazy. You are moving mountains out of your way.